we put my comfort off. You actively made a choice to become homeless.
Yes.
To start.
Yes, and even in the beginning, I slept sometimes in the playground in Queens, or because I had a little Isuzu 1990 Isuzu rodeo. I would sleep under the bridge over there in my truck. But yeah, it was a choice that I made. Like, am I serious about this? It's about priorities, right? It was like, do I go get a place now? Or do I like go for my ultimate dreams, like to really like take over the music industry and do all of these things? And I understood that I couldn't do both. So I had to put my comfort off for a while. I never imagined 12 years.
Okay. Welcome to the Founder's Journey podcast. Inspiration, education for founders by founders. Welcome back to the Founder's Journey podcast. Actually in a studio today with the owner of the studio. We're going to start with the most unbelievable thing, and I'll tell you the story about how I heard the story. You started the studio, 4 floors, New York City.
Yeah.
You were homeless.
Homeless for 12 years.
For 12 years?
Homeless for 12 years.
All right. So walk us through. You talk about a startup journey, right? Walk us through this. You go from homeless and you build lounge studios where we're sitting in New York City today.
It's here after a long journey. But yeah, it started off with me coming from Cleveland, Ohio. A native Browns fan. Anything Cleveland, die hard. I actually have a tattoo of Cleveland written across my back. And I'm not joking. It's about this big. But yeah, I came here with like $50. I didn't, everybody comes to New York aspirational. It's like the city where you make things happen.
Right.
And I had $50. And of course, there were a few family members trying to talk me out of it. I had just graduated from college and with a degree in sociology, criminology. So it's like, you're going to New York to do music and you have no money. You just got finished paying off your college parking tickets. But I did. I came here and originally I wasn't homeless. I stayed in the Bronx, 224th Street. The only place I could afford was a 1-room. I shared the kitchen, shared the bathroom with 4 other people on the floor. And I just had a little room and I had a futon. And I worked at the Department of Juvenile Justice. I worked with at-risk youth that were locked up. And we made less than nothing, as I'm sure you can imagine, that type of job. I was making, I think, like $24,000 a year, working about 70 hours a week. But I saved every penny during that to get a space. And it ended up being, in Manhattan. And when I got the space, there came a point where I couldn't afford, even though it was cheap, I was just renting a room. There came a point where I'm trying to buy material for the space. I'm trying to get wood. I'm trying to get drywall because I built all of these places myself by hand. Absolutely no help. Not another person helped with this.
Right. And these are recording studios that are used by some of the biggest names in the music industry. The
biggest names. I'm sure when you walked in, you saw Mariah Carey.
I saw Mariah Carey up there.
Yeah. Justin Bieber, Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
You name it. We've had literally everybody in the music industry through these doors and work with them and still do to this day.
Yep.
But it came a point where I couldn't afford both. So I had to make a decision, like, can I build this place? And it would have took forever. It took over 1.5 years to build the first room.
So you're renting it.
I'm renting the place.
And building it as you did that.
A few pieces of wood at a time. I was making no money. And I couldn't afford to get the wood or the drywall sometimes. I couldn't afford to get it delivered. So sometimes I would walk from Home Depot. Sometimes it would be the Home Depot in Queens because they don't sell like wood materials here in this one. I would get on the train with like 8 2x4x8s. Everybody's looking at me crazy on the train. They're like, he's not going to come. And I would just sit there. Everybody would look at me crazy and I would be sweating profusely by the time I made it back to Manhattan. It's a 45-minute trip. And I did that every time I got paid. I would go get a little more material and come and build and get a little more material. That lasted until I ended up building the space. But, I had bigger dreams than just having one studio.
Yeah.
So it was like, do I go get a place now? Or do I like go for my ultimate dreams, like to really like take over the music industry and do all of these things? And I understood that I couldn't do both. So I had to put my comfort off for a while. I never imagined 12 years.
Okay, but when you say put your comfort off, like, because there's a lot of founders that are probably listening to this today that think, oh, I'm super uncomfortable. We might run out of money and I'm not sure.
But I'm roughing it.
They are not, like when you say we put my comfort off, you actively made a choice to become homeless.
Yes.
To start.
Yes. And even in the beginning, I slept sometimes in the playground in Queens, or because I had a little Azuzu 1990 Azuzu rodeo. I would sleep under the bridge over there in my truck. But yeah, it was a choice that I made. Like, am I serious about this? It's about priorities, right?
Right.
And that's one of the things we'll get to later. It's not everybody's journey, right?
Right.
But sometimes if you're strong enough to handle some things, that's your journey. And it was something that I made a decision that I felt like I was strong enough to handle. And imagine, like, no privacy. So no bathroom, no shower. I had to go to, you remember Bally's back in the day? I had a Bally's membership. Yeah. So I would go there. That was my shower. That was where I would go brush my teeth. That's where I would, and it lasted longer than I thought, but I don't regret a moment of it.
You weren't married at the time.
No. I couldn't keep a girlfriend at the time.
It's a little hard to bring a girl home.
Where do you live?
I got this bench over in Queens. Sorry, I got to make a Home Depot run. It's going to take me about a day and a half.
Why don't you come visit me at work?
So what was the passion that led you into this? Like, what was it? The music industry? Was it starting your own studios? What was it that kind of, because you gotta have a huge why right behind making that choice.
Okay, so originally I always thought, like, I'm going to be a football player. I was state champ in football, state champ in track. I was the captain of the football teams, captain of the track team, full scholarship to school on football, ran track and but then I tore my knee up 3 times, same knee.
Where did you go?
University of Northern Iowa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was after the 3rd tear that it was like, I realized I actually don't love football. I love being competitive. I love winning. I love putting my mind to stuff and overcoming obstacles. But I didn't really love football. And I thought about it after the 3rd ACL surgery. What can I do? Like, what do I love to do? And it had always been music. And I was like, oh, I actually have a passion for this thing. But nobody ever tells you to go out and pursue music as a career. Like, I was actually in school, I was a Macy's Minority and Medicine Scholar because of my SAT scores. Like, I was always a great test taker, even I started college as pre-med, but that's the thing they sort of tell you, like, oh, go do the thing to make the money. Oh, you're smart. Like, go down this route. So for me, ever saying like, oh, I'm going to go use this college scholarship to do something in music was like, no.
So you end up, so that love of music actually leads you then into New York.
Yes.
Right. Brings you to New York and you say, okay, I want to go do something in the music industry. But was building studios? Was that the thing?
That was the vehicle, right? Okay. So my thought process was, I want to build this music empire. How do I make money while progressing in the field? What can I do? And so before I even came here, I wrote out a business plan. I looked at the economic census, how many studios were in New York, how much were they making, how many employees did they have? I'm a very big analytics research guy. Yeah. Obviously, I built all of these rooms from researching, from sitting down reading books. So I did the work. It always looks to other people like I'm just jumping off a cliff, but I've put in hours of what's happening, what is the market doing?
So it's very calculated.
Very calculated, but it never looks like it because it's like, oh, he doesn't have any money and he's going to New York to do this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you came with a plan.
I came with a plan. I knew I was going to build a studio. So I worked at that jail. I never went out to the movies. I never did.
Yeah.
I saved every single dollar that I had. And for this.
Yeah. That's amazing. What was I'm afraid to ask this one. What would you think your biggest mistake was?
I think my biggest mistake was, and I'm still correcting it, I'm still working on it. It's a flaw I think that was within me.
Yeah.
Not realizing that everybody isn't going to give the same amount to what they say their passion is that you do.
Right.
I've run across and that comes across in like hiring decisions. It comes across in like, you know, partnerships that you do, relationships in general. And I had to learn, like, it was a healthy lesson that like I said, I'm still learning that not everybody's meant to walk your journey. Not everybody's meant to overcome the things that you overcame. Just because you can do it, that doesn't mean that everybody was built to do that. You shouldn't
expect them to do.
You should not expect them to do that. And I was young. I started this business at 23. And in my mind, in that younger mind, before I had a lot of the experiences that I had, I came into it with the expectation of like, oh, you want to be a recording engineer? Oh, you're gonna be homeless. Like you're gonna be like me. You're gonna lose 30 pounds.
How does an employee live up to an expectation of what you did to get where you were? That's really hard to ask.
But what happened was, and this is the crazy thing, is the very first person that I hired, Michaelan Blue Spruce, is you know, he's my partner now. He's multi-Grammy winning. He just won another Grammy recently. He was my first hire. I hired him right out of NYU. And he was very much like me. He worked 80, 90-hour weeks. He had no days off. We never took days off. He was working at Home Depot. I hired him. And so that was my first employee. So to me, I'm thinking like...
You got spoiled.
Oh, man. I'm like, yo, this is going to be... I'm
going to find more like him.
Oh, I'm going to find 10 more of these guys. And obviously, that never happened. I never found one more of him. And he was the one that helped me come to the realization, because he works like me. One day he said to me, he said, Walt, I could have never done what you did to get this dream. And he said, this passion that you have, I'm with you on your journey.
Right.
And this wasn't meant for me. Like I couldn't have done it even if it was my passion, because I'm not built for it.
Right.
And when he was telling me that, I understood, because I looked at him like, oh, you have the equal passion, the equal burning desire to do things. But when he made it clear, like, there's something more in you that most people don't have, and they shouldn't have to, because he didn't. Right. When I realized he was accepting, like, yo, I don't have that. How could I expect anybody else to have it?
This is something that, you know, we've talked about a few times on the podcast, right? It's I think as founders, it's really easy, and as entrepreneurs, it's really easy to have that expectation that everybody you hire is going to live up, is going to be that, have that same level of intensity, have that same level of sacrifice.
Especially when they say it's their dream, like, oh, you know, this is not a regular field. Like, this is a creative field. Like, he graduated from NYU in this great program that they have. There's only 2 people that graduated with his class that are working in music today. Right. So this is not like I went to school for accounting and I became an accountant, like most will. It takes something extra to be in this field. So when people say that this is their dream, to me, it's sort of like, oh, you'll put this priority. Right.
But, you know, but that's the thing, right? But there is that extra gene. There's that extra something that sits inside of a founder that says, I'm actually willing to do what most people think is just insane. I'm willing to give up my home. I'm willing to give up relationships. I'm willing to give up, like, that's
food.
That.
I lost 30 pounds while I was building this studio, just so you guys know. I would walk around outside in Times Square looking for money on the ground, because literally every piece of money from my check went to material and to build, to screws, to drywall. I lost 30 pounds during the time from the year and a half it took to build the studio.
Because of the physical labor and that combined with, and you didn't eat.
I didn't eat. And it's just like, looking back on it, like, how could you expect anybody to do that? Like, there's something wrong with me, not anything wrong with them.
Did the landlord say, like, hey, what's going on in there? Like,
so I'm glad you asked about that. So Scott Handler, this is Handler Real Estate that owns this place. I met him in a really tough time, because obviously business didn't just start off booming.
Right.
And I'm come here with $50 and I'm barely stringing together. And so I got like 3 months behind, and the owner comes and talks to me, and he sort of sees what I'm doing. And he's like, yo, you're building this, you know, by yourself, as he comes in. And he was amazing with me. He believed in me. Like, and it takes help from outside of yourself a lot of times for people to recognize, like, they see that thing in you. And he, I'm not supposed to be building this, like, obviously.
Right.
But they let me, he understands that I did all the lectures. He knows. But it was after he sat down and talked to me, and he gave me so much grace. And I told him, give me this amount of months. And to this day, he says, you're the only exception to the rule of, kindness. You're kind, and it comes back and bites you in the butt. He was like, you've always stuck to your word. And he was like, I felt that when I first met you, and it's carried on to today. So now I'm the biggest tenant in this building. Now I started off with one room, 15 by 35, and now I'm paying $30,000 a month in rent.
Right. Yeah. Right. So the Founders Journey podcast is brought to you by the Founders Collective. As fellow entrepreneurs, we all are, right? We understand the highs and lows of that journey, and that's really what the Founders Collective is all about. It's a combination of coaching at scale and strategic planning to really help you accelerate that journey and make it a little bit more fun. So check it out at www.thefounderscollective.com. How many years has it been since you started this now?
21 years.
Okay. So 21 years of sort of collected wisdom and experience and stuff.
Yeah.
3 biggest lessons you've learned, Walter, on the way here.
The biggest lesson, I think, was you can't do it alone. You need a team. Because a lot of this I did on my own. It took a long time to do this. I'm 21 years in, and it's amazing. We have a lot of, things happening here, but it was a slow grind. That's one thing. The other thing is become financially literate, right? I didn't know what a credit score was when I got to New York. I didn't even know that you could have what a credit score was, like how it was measured.
Right.
So when people would say, oh, you're spending all your money, why don't you just get a loan? And then I was like, well, how do you do that? I don't know. And then I get to the bank and they're like, you don't have credit. You don't have a credit card. You don't have. I had no financial literacy, and it continued on, because I was building. It was like, do I have time to spend? But then when you start having to pay taxes and you start having to do payroll and you have to understand where your money's going, where it's coming from, how to stay financially healthy to be able to borrow later on if you need it. So I would say that's the second thing. And then the third lesson, I think, is what I touched on a little bit earlier, is just having grace, understanding that not everybody is you, and then understanding where people are coming from, not writing them off like you're not good enough or you're not cut out for it, but finding a way to make them cut out for it, finding their niche, finding out what does make them tick, if there's something there. And finding those things instead of me, in the beginning, I would just be like, oh, you said this was your dream. This was your passion. You can't work 30 hours a week, but then, people have different situations. Maybe somebody's taking care of their mom at home where they're not able to do that. Those things all came with age and just through experience. And so I would say that those are the 3 biggest lessons that I've learned.
It's governing that intensity, right? I think that natural intensity. We were joking about that when we got here about a recent guest of ours, who's a good friend of me and Peter, and it's governing. It's finding the ability to govern that intensity a little bit, to understand the differences between. That's what we mentioned with the that gene, that extra gene that the founder has, right? But it's taking the time to actually. I mean, if you look at what great leaders have is empathy.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And and I think 2 things, right? Empathy and self-awareness. Self-awareness to number 1, say, I'm not like everybody else. 99 we're sitting here in New York City, 99.9999%, even in probably the most dynamic city in the world, are never going to do the stuff that you did. Yeah. They're never going to.
Yes.
Right. So that's number 1. But actually having that self-awareness to say it's neither good or bad. Right. What I did is just what I needed to do. It was my journey.
It was my journey.
And it's a choice. You made a choice
to
do it.
But that's but
it's
that's
not good or bad.
It's right. It's not and it's also not good or bad if other people don't choose that same thing. And having the empathy to kind of understand that and still lead, not with that expectation that they're going to sacrifice their lives to go do this, right? And it's a hard thing, I think, for founders. It's really easy to get caught up in your own stuff, right? Just caught up in your own story and expect everybody to follow that story. And it's different. But
another part of that too is I felt like that. I think a part of me feeling like that was, I think I dealt with and still deal with at times imposter syndrome. Where it's like, no, I'm no better than
right.
And even like like I said, my partner Blue, he's my head engineer here.
Yeah.
He tells me all the time, I have a couple patents And he's like, yeah, you're an inventor. I'm like, no, I'm not an inventor. Like Thomas Edison, like, that's an inventor. Like, you know, and he's like,
they got white hair and crazy white hair.
Yeah, like, no, I'm not. And it, you know, he's played obviously you could tell like a very like instrumental role in me developing.
Yeah.
But being able to look at myself like, oh, there is something different about me. That's special, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that imposter syndrome played a role in me not being able to see other people's stories for a while.
Right.
Because it was like, you know, I'm not that special. You know, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Right.
But there is that extra gene in me that pushes me beyond where other people would normally stop.
Well, you're also in an industry with some of the most, not only some of the biggest egos in the world, right? But some of the most famous people in the world, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, to say like, I think every founder can wrestle with imposter syndrome a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I know I have, Peter has, Brett. But then you sort of compound that by saying like, I'm in this studio, actually the one helping create this music with Mariah Carey or with Justin Bieber or with like, I mean, these people, and I'm actually an integral part of this. That's
But you don't see it though when you're doing it. Like, and it's so funny. Everybody's like, who's your favorite artist? Like, who have you gotten an autograph from? There was only one person I was mad that I didn't get here to. I've never gotten an autograph from anybody except there was one person. His name is Scarface. He's an old school rapper.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so mad when I missed Lawrence O'Donnell being here. So he's an MSNBC. And I was like, yeah, man, I missed Lawrence O'Donnell coming to do an interview. And I'm like, my friends are like, what? Who is Lawrence O'Donnell? And like, why do you do you care? Like, you know. So yeah, I work with big people, but it's sort of, I'm used to it now. And I feel like I said, a part of that is like, oh, they're doing the thing.
Right.
But we are creating the support system to make that thing sound great, for it to be great, for them to be creative and be able to do the thing themselves here. So yeah, I self-talk, you know, some positive self-talk.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
At what point did you feel like you were successful? Have you ever?
For moments, I felt it.
Yeah.
Right. Do I feel like I'm successful right now? I feel like in the moment because you guys took an interest in my story, like, oh, I must be doing something correct.
Yeah.
But it's not a feeling that just stays like, oh, I'm just successful. I'm doing my thing. I have these studios. It's momentary when I build something. So building these rooms were hard. Like the labor it takes to build something on your own. Like I have stories where I was like holding up a piece of drywall. You know, normally you need somebody on the ceiling. I'm like it falls on me. I fall off the ladder, 3 times in a row. Then I sit on the floor and to be raw, like I've just sat here and cried before.
Yeah.
Right.
Just not, even from the beginning, like
if you cut a piece of drywall the wrong way, you're like, oh, that doesn't fit. I just carried that from the Bronx.
Oh, yo.
On the subway.
Oh my God.
What the hell?
Yo, I was the most efficient drywall cut. Because that was what factored into everything. If I cut this wrong, I don't know if I have enough money to get another sheet of drywall. That's another 2 weeks now. Like, I got to wait for my paycheck.
We're going to move the electrical over here now.
Right? Yeah. I don't have enough room.
Where the hole is.
But that part of the story though, Walter, is so powerful, right? Because you say it like, I literally sat on the floor and cried. And I think every founder who is building something that has that purpose and has that why has had those moments repeatedly where it's like, what?
Repeatedly.
Like, what
are you doing?
Else can possibly go wrong?
Yo, oh
right?
My
like,
gosh.
how does this keep getting worse and worse every time? I think, right?
Yes.
But at some point, you actually start to break through that, and that's the part that that just becomes so. I want to fast forward to today, right?
Yes.
So today we're sitting here. We mentioned this before. This is Lounge Studios in New York City. You got 4 floors.
Yeah.
Some of these are podcasting studios where sort of commoners like me and Peter come in. Others are where some of the greatest artists in the world go and record. We'll get some footage of that and put it on here. But that's not all you're doing. You've now like you made a half joking reference, but I don't actually think you were kidding, to like building a music empire.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so you're doing more than
just
than
audio.
Studios,
yeah.
Right?
So we actually have a photography studio. And we've had the biggest names in there again, from SZA to, everybody you can name. We have a video studio where people shoot their music videos. We just recently did an Atmos studio, which is a new surround sound source for movies and also Atmos for Industries now have a new surround sound format that can be played in headphones called Atmos.
Yep.
So we just built one of those rooms. And I say we, I mean me. But
Right.
You're still doing it.
I'm still doing it because
Yeah.
the one thing that, you know, and I've become more financially literate, but starting so far in the hole, I've never amassed enough money to where I didn't have to worry about falling behind.
Yeah.
Right. So everything that I've done here has been self-financed. So I've never had a loan. I've never had a, you know, I have a record label and we've put out several successful acts. You know, I've done a little bit of everything, but it's all self-financed. It's all me make the money, invest the money.
You also have a software company.
Yes, Spatio. And so that was actually what I was alluding to with the Atmos.
Yeah.
So there's this song format called Atmos, right? It's surround sound. It's mandatory for all major label artists. The crazy thing is it started a few years ago. And when I saw it, it was $1,500 per song. I work with a lot of independents. I can't afford $1,500 per song.
So that $1,500 per song is the engineering cost?
That's just to get, it's the engineering cost to get your song mixed in Atmos.
Okay. In this format.
New format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a Dolby format. And I work with a lot of independents here. That's always been a part of my journey too, making sure it stayed affordable for the independents. Like, but I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to afford this. And so my mind started going back then, even before it was like really widespread. I knew it was going to go this way. And we're getting this money. I'm like, I have to figure out how. So what's making this cost so much? It takes like 6 hours to do it. Right. The file delivery. You have to get individual files. So it's not just them sending, like if you're getting a master, you just send the song.
Yeah.
With this, you have to send the drums separate, the cymbals separate, the guitar separate, the vocal, all of these tracks, right? And so it's a lot of maintenance, even just setting up the session. And so I went into my fake inventor, innovative mode. And
it's not fake, man.
It's
very real.
We'll see. And I started automating things. And I'm the type of person, I can read up on something and maintain it for as long as I need to. So if it's Python, if it's learning how to work macros, I'll do it, just like building a room. Right. If you ask me to build something for you today, I wouldn't be able to do it because it's not on my mind. I flush things because I don't have enough space up here. Right. But I learned how to do all those things, and I created this amazing software that takes the time from 6 hours to 6 minutes. And so so there's about 150,000 songs released a day.
A day.
And I thought it was fake when I first 150,000 songs are released a day.
Holy crap.
99% of those are the independent market.
Right.
Right. So instead of paying, $1,500, what if I can get it cheap enough where they were paying $50 or $25? You're capturing, 1 to 10%. You're talking about $150 million a year.
Right.
If I can capture that small amount of the market, just charging $50 or $25.
Yeah.
Amazingly, I made the product. And our first major test, I was doing it with independents, but then I went to the labels. And so now we've done some of the biggest acts. We just did the Wallows, which is a rock band of billions of streams. And how we got them was very interesting. They had it done by some of the top people in the industry, mixing it for $2,000, $1,500. They hated it because they're a purist rock group. No, we don't want to do this new surround thing. They say, hey, Walt's doing that. The A&R says, Walt, I think, has something that he's been doing for us. They give me a call, and they're like, they're probably going to not like it, but just do it. And the thing is, remember, I could turn it around like this.
Yeah.
They send me all the files. I send it right back to them done. They give it to the band. The band the same day approves it and says, we want him doing the whole album.
Yeah.
And so since then, I've been doing all of the major labels. But remember, the goal is the independent market because they don't put out close to as much music.
So when I was here last time, this was 6 weeks ago, probably.
Yeah, and you gave me some amazing advice. Yes.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you did.
But at the time, you were trying to break into the major labels, right? As your kind of go-to-market strategy was, and you were kind of beating your head against the wall.
Yes.
With this, right?
So when we first met, I was already doing things for the majors. What I needed from them was exclusivity, right?
Right.
What I was trying to do was to have them strap my software across their front end and being able to do their catalog work.
Right.
What was getting me was they're paying me to do this. I do it better than all of their people. I do it faster than all of their people. And so it only makes sense. You're going to pay somebody $1,500. You're going to pay me $300.
Right.
It didn't make sense why. So I'm sitting with the CEOs of these billion-dollar companies, and I was telling you, it was, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. We love it. And we're deliberating internally. And so I came to, I was like, what is this deliberating internally?
Why do you need to think about this?
Why do you need to think about this? And it's because the guys, these are high up people. They know how to say no. Oh, we're not interested in this right now. This is something, is something we're developing currently. Yeah. They were keeping me on this hook. And I went to, I was like, what is going on? And what you told me really helped. And it really, because we've moved forward with one of those big companies. And there's another one where your advice really came into handy. So I remember I told you they would keep having these conversations, like asking these details and you said that companies that big are usually trying to talk themselves out of doing the thing that works.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so when they're talking, like you told me, first of all, give them 10% of my energy, which I have done.
Yeah.
Right.
I've given them, and going to market to the indies, which was my original plan,
Right.
give that your energy. And then don't entertain all the talking because they're just trying to talk themselves out of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I had a call recently with another, big label, and the CEO actually contacted us, and he's going for it, but they have their tech guy, because all these companies,
right.
And they always look at me on the phone like, they're looking at me like, you didn't invent anything. Like, right. And they're thinking like, whatever you can do, I'm sure we have guys that are making more money than you that can do it.
Right.
And so this guy starts asking me all these questions, and I'm like, oh, that's proprietary, but it was my first time feeling comfortable shutting them down.
Yeah.
Instead of, because I told you before, I would be like, well, this, and then trying to explain things to them and tell them like, no, this is a real process. This actually works. Just take the sample, give me some samples. But I just shut them down. And it actually worked because the CEO sort of just jumped in, sort of like, well, he's doing samples for us. Right. Like, why do you even
doing it?
What does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Like,
right.
But before I would be trying to jump through 80 loops, trying to appease like every little, intuition, like thing they had that they thought they needed to know.
Yeah.
And it freed me up so much because I didn't feel so heavy after the conversation. I didn't feel like, are they trying to steal my idea? Are they trying to get in? It was just like, I didn't even give you anything to steal. Either you're going to do it or you're not.
Right.
And so that was a big relief, because when I came to you, I thought they were maybe trying to steal my software. It was like, no. They're imagine trying to turn a cruise ship, or I can't remember the analogy, but it takes a long time. So they're not trying to develop it, because if they had the people, they would have been trying already. They're trying to talk themselves out of thinking that they really need you.
Yeah. And you see that a lot in startups, right? And especially in tech, where, you start to see that happen a lot, where companies will get really, like, you go in and I see this with companies in our portfolio. They go in and they start selling to these really super large companies, and then they wonder why they're not getting anywhere. And it's because there's so much risk aversion, right?
And that's what
and it's not. That's what they're trying to avoid. It's like, I don't want to make a bad decision. I don't even care about a good decision.
Yes,
I just don't want to make a bad decision, right? And you see that a lot. But if you go kind of down market a little bit to more on like the indie labels, like you said, then they're trying to just figure out a way to save money.
They're like,
right? I
you
just
can
want
do that.
That's
right.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Cool. Let's try it. Right.
And the smaller the label,
what's the
risk?
easier
and so we've had a few indie labels. They just come on.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, oh, you just did 100 samples for us. They all were amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
Why wouldn't we do this? But you're right. The bigger companies, but it was frustrating to me, because it was like, these are the top people, and it was frustrating because they wouldn't say no. I think that's really frustrating, because I know they're the type of people that can and say no every day to people.
Right.
But the fact that they just had me on this,
dragging you on.
it was just like very fun. But like I said, that conversation, it made me understand, because I had a fear that they were, like I said, I funded this myself. It took, 2-3 years of me funding this.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, they have millions of dollars to pour into somebody's pocket, some coder and some, other engineer. And they're sitting there, mad scientists, trying to steal my stuff. But after I talked to you, that it got on my mind. This is one of a kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really funny? I was actually just having this conversation with somebody like last week, and we were talking about the same, not your business, but the same kind of concept, right? What large companies are really good at, when you're selling to large companies, they're really good at making markets. Like, they'll go out. Oh, I remember it was actually a previous guest of ours on the podcast, Matt Matros. Matt and I were talking, and he was telling the story about. And he was writing about this, how he owned a chain of like protein bars, like not like the bars you eat, like a smoothie, right, with protein in them. And all of a sudden, Starbucks started to compete with him. And he thought he was going out of business.
Yeah.
And the funny part was, and we were talking about this, and it's that what Starbucks actually ended up doing was creating a huge market around smoothies and around like healthy smoothies with protein and stuff like that. But what they were really poor at was the execution
Actually doing
in
it.
their, in their stores.
Mhm.
And they ended up discontinuing it, but in a lot of ways, it made his business.
It's popular.
You see that happen a lot, right?
Mhm.
Where companies, you see founders get really scared sometimes because this large company is coming in to try to compete with me.
Mhm.
You can rest assured that company is never going to execute the way that you will if it's not their core business. Now, if it's
Yes.
a core
Yeah.
business, it's a different story.
Yes.
But it's really hard for them to be able to do that, but they can make a market, right? They can go out and spend enough money to educate the market where you can come in and be able to sell
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, and that's amazing. But I think, like you said, the cool part is that I think that they're too slow. They're not even trying to do that.
They are
No.
too slow.
Yeah,
No.
these companies are, they're huge. Like we're talking billion-dollar companies.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is, like you said, risk aversion.
Yeah.
Which makes all the sense in the world.
Yep.
And then even if it is like, it does, the benefits do outweigh the risk, it's turning that ship.
Well,
how do you turn that?
Yeah.
And it's the same risk aversion that normally keeps large companies from going out and actively trying to steal your technology. They're not going to do it.
Yes.
There's not enough to be gained by taking that risk.
Of course.
There's public relations risk,
Mhm.
there's financial risk, there's things like that. The amount of times that they're actually going to do that is super, is super rare relative to how often founders think it's
It
happening.
would happen, yeah. Well, thank you for the therapy session.
I
I feel a lot better now.
But again, I think it's part and parcel to your story, right? Because it's another thing where you're going out and you're creating this music empire, right?
Yeah.
And it started with the studios. Now it's into, software.
Yeah.
It's, where does it go? Where does it go next?
Distribution. Believe it or not, my goal when I came here was to have a music empire, and not like in a traditional sense, like, all the people are with him.
Right.
It was to have a music empire where we could have a lot of independent artists. So streaming has made this even a more like tangible thing.
Yeah.
Where we can have independent artists record the same quality, get all of the same, things that these bigger artists get, marketing, distribution, and have it in under one house where we're not taking advantage of the artist. We're not, I know you know so about some of the contracts in the music industry.
Yep.
They're, I'm in the industry, but there are some contracts that are very predatory. Like, I want to get that done away with. I feel like people put their hearts and their passions into this. Like, they deserve a fair share of the money that they're making with their creativity.
Right.
And create a hub where you don't have to have the label owning 80%, 90% of your creative, like, juices. Like, no, you've done that. This is your thing. And so that's where we're going. All of these things, Lounge Studio, Spatio, we have the distribution push, they're all feeding into the same thing. So it's been a long circle, like, coming around, but we're almost at the other end to meet that goal, to be able to have this hub where I feel like major labels will not be a thing 15 years from now.
Yep.
That's my hope. Sorry guys that all work at the labels that I'm friends with, but you can come work for me. I'll pay really good.
So it's based on, you obviously have a founding principle based on how you operated to get where you are today.
Mhm.
But that sounds like very much a principle where you're creating an environment or the ability for an artist to do what you did.
Yes.
And do it on your own and keep the outcomes as much as
and have help.
Yes.
Because I didn't have any help.
Yeah.
That I don't want them to have to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be homeless for 12 years.
Yeah.
I don't want them to sleep on a sliding board in a park or under a bridge.
Yeah.
If they can get to where they need to be without those obstacles, because not everybody's built the same. And you shouldn't have to be built like this.
Yeah.
Right.
To be able to achieve something that you love in life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then be rewarded for it fairly.
Yeah.
That is my core principle. That's been my thing since before I got here when I was just young. It was like, it wasn't to work with the bigger stars. And that's when you talked about, the bigger stars, yeah, it's cool when they come here. It helps add to, my pedigree or, my accolades, but that's not the thing. When I'll feel like I've made it, I've been successful when I'm able to distribute tens of thousands of regular artists.
Yeah.
And they might not all be Beyonce. They might not all be Mariah Carey, but they are doing what they love and they're able to make a living off of it. And so when that happens and you come and say, do you feel successful? I will be able to like look both of you in the eye and say, yes, I do.
I can't wait for that.
Yep. Unbelievable story, man.
Thank you.
So, when I was here about 6 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
just a funny story to kind of wrap us up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting here, we were in a studio next door, and we're recording other podcasts.
Oh, that's right. We were next door.
Yeah, we were
Yes,
next door,
yes.
and Walter came in and said, "Hey, I'm your engineer, Walter,"
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Would you mind if I actually listen into the podcast?" And I said, "Sure." So we're sitting there, and he said, "Yeah." He said, and at the end of the podcast, so that was really interesting. He said, "I own this place."
Yeah.
And I said to Peter, I was like, "We're going back to New York. We're getting this guy on because his story is unbelievable."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this is. So it's a thrill to have you here, and really
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
it.
I really appreciate
God,
it.
man.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you for doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, as a founder, we don't feel worthy.
Yeah, it's really incredible. It's awesome, man. So that's it for this edition of the Founders Journey podcast. Thrilled to have Walter here. If you're in New York City and you need studio space, you're doing podcasting, you're doing stuff like that too.
Photo studios, anything.
Check them out at is it loungestudios.com?
LoungeStudiosNYC.com.
LoungeStudiosNYC.com.
Yep.
That's it, Founders Journey podcast. If you like the episode, make sure you like, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening in, comment,
ask
and,
questions.
Yep,
I
ask us
guarantee
questions
you'll
and
answer
share.
them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Great to have you. See you next time on the Founders Journey podcast.
Yeah.
Like I learned all that stuff. Acoustics, like floating the floor. I dropped the ceiling. These walls aren't the real walls. I built up framework and built, pretty much a house within a room.
Yeah.
And you've got a patent on this.
Oh yeah. So
this thing.
I'm patented on this. A couple patents on this thing. In 2016, these were my first patents. Then I have one pending on these. I built from scratch. This is actually the first prototype of this board. I built this in my kitchen.
Yeah.
So, and now they're in every room that I have.
And so, what do they do? And so they're performing in there.
Well, back in the day, now this is Blue Room, so he only mixes down here. We don't record in here. But there used to be a drum set back there.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, oh, this is where we come to like chill out, and he does his work in here. He just won that Latin Grammy.
I see those all the time.
Yeah.
I've never been in the same room as one.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a blessing, man. It's like it's a dream come true, but it's like I'm not at the dream, like I'm not at the place where it needs to be.
No, that's fine. It's just there's no finish line.
All right, so behind that door.
This is where I lived for 12 years. Actually 11, because the first year was actually in Queens, like on sliding boards and shit.
Oh my God.
So this was your house.
This is my house, and like those pictures back on the back wall, that was like my first label check on the wall back there next to the pictures of my family.
What?
And then even this little board right here.
Yeah.
This board, I've never touched it from when I built this place. That little
This stuff that's written on there.
that stuff has just been there for 20 years.
This
forever.
is costs for stuff?
This is like people that owe me money for stuff.
Past due.
The owing money thing.
Yeah.
That's an emotional thing too sometimes. So if you don't have a home and they owe you money, and they're like, I'll get it to you. Like, it's in the mail.
And that's how he was like, yo, I need to know you. Like, who is this person that takes down a wall, changes the AC, fixes the AC with his hands, puts the wall back up in a day?
Right.
Who does that? And we became best friends. And this is Atmos. So all of these speakers.
Wow. This is the software.
This is the software company. This is it. So you don't even see these rooms on the site.
Yeah.
You can't rent them out commercially, but this is what I've been doing. This whole spatio, running command lines and macros, and
so it's more speakers and more sound.
Yeah, so this is the easy thing. Like, you see more speakers. What Dolby did, I thought it was a joke at first. Like, there's no way you can hear surround sound in your headphones. You have two ears.
I've
this
heard
is
it.
stereo.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. But when we did the test, and it was like, oh, you can hear things above you,
right,
and different,
different, and behind you, but you have two ears. But when you think about it, you hear in stereo. You have two ears.
Yeah. Right.
It was a brain hack. They figured out how your brain interprets different signals, different frequencies, different the way ambience is perceived by your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So they brain hacked it to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And once I understood that, I love that type of show. I deep dove into it really. And so my whole software, instead of most mixing engineers are doing it a way where they're moving objects, I've actually understand why your brain perceives it like that.
Right.
When I took that deep dive.
Yeah.
So The reason I'm able to do it so fast is because I don't move the instruments. I move the frequencies that your brain perceives as being the instruments.
Oh, you adjust it.
I adjusted it. And nobody else does it like that. So even Dolby used that to build their technology. But then we're like, yeah, you could just move your drum here. You can move your cymbal here. But it was like, no, use the same logic that they used to create the software to be able to mix the thing.
Yeah. Right.
And so, besides all of the automation and all the other things, that's why my mixes sound so good. Why I can get these high-end people that are like, yo, he nailed it on the first try.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it stays true to the mix that they liked, but then it gives it the spatial surrounding around you.
I saw I heard a demo of it where the guy's cutting your hair and you see him, you hear him walking around. It was freaky.
Yeah,
I'm like, what the heck is this?
And it's real. Yeah, it's a real thing.
It really freaked me.
But it's like it's like all the new Mercedes have apps. It's just like Polestar, Volvo.
Yeah.
I mean, the market is like all the major labels. You can't even release music anymore on a major label.
Right.
Unless it's in Atmos too. And the crazy thing is, I saw this before it all started going that route. I just like, yo, this is actually cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And I started working on it. But like I said, maybe if I would have had a few $1 million, I would have got to the point faster. But I got to the point right when it was needed.
Did you code that yourself?
I did. So what I did was so like how I built the first board upstairs.
Right.
Yeah.
You saw the screens upstairs, right?
Yeah.
Those were from Best Buy, some Insignias. I bought an infrared, so I just did the research. How do you turn a regular TV into a touchscreen?
Right.
Yeah.
Got infrared XY, learned all of that shit. Then what I do is, okay, this is my product. Is there a way to do this better? These screens are, I had manufactured in China, but they're capacitive touch instead of like just doing the infrared touch.
Yeah.
So I did the code, I did the macros, but then I brought somebody else in to improve upon it. Yeah. So it's like, oh, this thing does work, but it's duct taped together because I did it. Now I have a guy named Brian who's come in and he did the part that it would have took me years to do. The back end is always the most important, is what I'm saying. Like, I can throw products together easy. The back end, the things that make sure that your system don't fail when it goes live, that's crucial. And that's what he's been building for this time. And we're going live in the next 2 weeks. So
that's
crossed, all the fingers crossed.